So Saturday night after Andre Ward stopped Sergey Kovalev in 8 rounds, I did an immediate reaction video with my cell phone and I posted it up on the channel. You guys know a lot of times when I do a video, I promote it on social media. I post it in the Facebook chat rooms and things like that. I didn't do that. I just posted it up on my channel and it created quite a stir. So far, at the time I'm filming this, it's now Monday evening, June 19th. It hasn't even been up, but for maybe, I don't know, 36 hours or so. There's 5,500 views, 250 likes, 68 dislikes, and over 650 comments. And those are the comments I approved. There were a lot of comments that I removed because they were racial and hateful and spiteful and all this stuff. Guys, look, if your comment, the first line of it, has some sort of racial slur or some race-baiting bullshit, or you're just immediately going to race or something like that, it's going to get removed. I don't want that shit on my channel, okay? You guys know I pride myself on this channel that I am one of the few out there who will objectively, realistically talk about things like race, politics, because they apply to boxing a lot of the time. And there was a ton of parallels in this fight with Ward Kovalev. In the first one, this whole situation. I will talk about those things, and I will talk about it without fear. And I live in a world, we all live in a world where there's double standards with that stuff, and there's a lot of censorship and Marxism around it. And I say, fuck you to all that shit, and I speak my mind on it. But we have to do it objectively and logically and with reason. So those of you trying to interject a bunch of hateful bullshit, that's just going to get removed. For the rest of you who actually critically watched my entire video, not the first 2 minutes and decided, oh, fuck you, and wrote some stupid racist comment, but actually watched the entire video and understood what I was trying to say just minutes after the fight, giving my immediate thoughts just minutes after the fight ended, thank you. I read the 600 plus comments you've left, and it compelled me to do another video. I want to address a few more things. Some of the things I'm going to say in this video might be repetitive with the first one. I apologize. Bear with me. But I do have some additional thoughts and insight. I've now gone back and I've seen some of the replays. I've talked to different people from both sides of the promotion, people who were there at the fight. I've heard different points of view. I've read your comments. I've read your questions. A lot of you guys on Twitter had a lot of questions. So, one thing I want to start with is the media. And if you guys would like me to delve into the current state of the boxing media and talk about some of this stuff a little bit more and do a video on that, let me know. Comment below and let me know and I'll do that. But we live in an age where it's not just boxing media, it's really all media because of the social media expansion, the 24-hour news cycle, all this stuff. But in sports media, particularly in boxing, most media are fans. They're super fans who started covering boxing, okay? And there are some people who have carved themselves into good, respectable boxing analysts, correspondents, writers, journalists, whatever word you want to put around it. I'd like to include myself in that category. Some of you will disagree. I believe most of you will agree. I've worked in this business now in the boxing media for a few years at a fairly involved level. And I work for a few reputable publications, and I've seen a thing or two, okay? And one thing I've learned just from being around it, there are just certain figures in this sport, certain athletes, certain entities that are very, very polarizing. And for better or worse, Andre Ward and Sergey Kovalev, both of them are very polarizing figures. And we live in a world on social media where you can go to whatever media place you want to go to, whether it's real media, respected media or not, to kind of get your point of view fed, your confirmation bias fed. If you're a fan who likes Sergey Kovalev, you're going to see certain situations in this fight that happened Saturday a certain way. If you're a fan of Andre Ward, you're going to see those same situations a different way. Now, you could be a fan of one of the two fighters, or both, or neither, and see it objectively and still have an opinion. And an opinion's okay. It's when you have bias, when literally for this guy 2 + 2 = 4, but for this guy 2 + 2 = 5. That's bias. And it's okay for media to have an opinion. I have a strong opinion. I'm very opinionated and I give my opinion in a very frank manner. But I don't have bias. And there's a very, very distinct difference. And some wackos look at what I say and they're like, oh, you're biased just because they're a wacko. I have preferences. I have opinions. There's certain fight styles I prefer. There's certain ways I score a round that maybe another person may not agree with. You know, I tend to give rounds to guys who press the action and do the more consistent work. Some guys will give a round to somebody for landing one punch. Whoever landed the best punch in the round, boom. Everyone has different criteria. It's okay to have those preferences and opinions. Maybe I don't like this fighter or that fighter, but I'm not going to score a fight differently just because I don't like those fighters. Maybe I like this fighter over here a lot. I'm not going to score a fight differently for them than I would for a guy I don't like. I score objectively and I'm consistent. So there's too much polarization, right? And the problem is there's too many people being credentialed to cover fights that have absolutely no business being there. They're too biased. They're fans. They're radical fans. They're radical with their opinions. And it's not even an opinion. It's literally seeing the world through a certain filter and nothing penetrates the filter. So last November when I went to Ward Kovalev 1, I saw things at Press Row that I should never see. And for the record, it wasn't the first time I saw it. I see it at a lot of fights, particularly Vegas fights. I don't know why it happens more there. I think it's because it's a bigger event and people want to be seen. I don't know. But in Press Row, people were jumping up and down when the decision was called and high-fiving and clapping. They were heckling during the fight, heckling one of the fighters, heckling one of the trainers. In the post-fight press conference, there were people heckling promoters and commission officials and even the fighter. And it bordered on harassment, literally harassment from people who had a media credential around their neck. Now, I wasn't there this Saturday, but we've all seen video of the post-fight press conference and you saw what took place. That should never happen. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's on YouTube. Go watch it. There's several channels. Fight Hub always does an outstanding job. Marcos Villegas always does a great job. He posted the whole thing up there where you can see it. There were several mainstream media people there who were reported on what was happening at the press conference. An ESPN writer posted a video on his Twitter page showing what was going on and saying this is not right. Chris Mannix, who used to write for Sports Illustrated, and now he does a very good podcast, he commented on it. There were several non-biased figures there saying, what the hell's going on here? And I know several people that were at Press Row who told me what was going on there in the media section. So, look, that's on Roc Nation, who controlled this promotion. They gave credentials to people who were literally friends of one of the fighters, fans of one of the fighters. And beyond that, a lot of people that call themselves media, because they just have a YouTube channel or a Facebook chat room or something, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some of the best, most unbiased, most watchable people on YouTube literally have nothing but a YouTube channel. There's people I love to watch that don't even call themselves media. I think Richard Dwyer's awesome. I think the Boxing Rant's awesome. I could go on and on. There's a few of them that I love to watch because their perspective is great. And all they have is a YouTube channel or a podcast or maybe it's a Facebook page, right? They're not trying to be full-time media or anything like that, but they do good stuff. So please understand, I'm not shitting on people who do YouTube. I do YouTube, okay? But some of these guys have YouTube channels and the promoters are not looking at the material on the channel. They're just letting the guys in. Maybe they're friends of friends and they're doing favors or whatever, but you guys know which channels I'm talking about. Some of the rhetoric that is spewed on some of these channels, quite frankly, is scary. It's not just dangerous, it's scary. And it's kind of a microcosm of the polarized times we're living in. But these guys should not be credentialed to fights. When you see people jumping up and down and high-fiving in press row, that is supposed to be a sacred area. And yeah, maybe I sound corny here, but that is supposed to be a sacred area where we tell the story of what's going on. Whether it be in an article or round by round scoring or tweets or whatever we're doing, we're telling the story for the people who can't be there. And even for the people watching on TV, we're adding to the story. We're telling them what's going on there at the event. There shouldn't be fans there. And there shouldn't be people acting unprofessionally there. And Roc Nation really, really blew it by giving media credentials to friends, family, fans of one of the fighters. Not cool. Now, look, all right, I got that rant out of the way. Let's talk really briefly about the Nevada State Athletic Commission, who I thought had a very, very poor night. I talked about that in the first video. So, Guillermo Rigondeaux in the co-feature scores a knockout with a punch after the bell, after 3 consecutive fouls that were on purpose just before the bell had sounded against Moises Flores. Referee Vic Jakulich was not in position. I've been to referee training seminars. You learn, one of the first things you learn when you hear that 10-second mark, you're supposed to get in between the two fighters. So if you got fighter 1 here, fighter 2 here, you're supposed to be right here in the middle, get positioned so that when the bell rings, you could jump in. Jakulich, I believe, was behind Rigondeaux, was in horrible position, just fell asleep. Rigondeaux grabbed the back of Flores' head, boom, 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 3 uppercuts, let's go. Flores is bent over because he had just been pulled down. The bell sounds. Rigondeaux and Flores throw a punch. Rigondeaux had much better position because he was upright. Flores was bent over. Rigo's shot lands. Flores goes down. Boom. Now, a lot of you are saying Flores took a dive. I don't know. I'm not in his body. Neither are none of you. None of you are experts. From what I saw, his eyes looked a little glassy. I don't think maybe he was completely unconscious like he may have tried to sell, but he looked pretty badly hurt to me. At the time, Jakulich didn't know what to do. He consulted with Bob Bennett of the Nevada State Athletic Commission. They watched some instant replays. Ultimately, they decided to give Rigondeaux a knockout win. That's incorrect, in my opinion. And for the record, they have since gone back. And today, they just released that they are changing it to a no decision. So 2 days later, they did get the right call. But that whole process was not right. That's not how it should be handled because HBO is involved. Bob Bennett went down and talked to Jim Lampley. It's one thing if you've made a ruling and you're just going to go down and explain what happened. But Jim Lampley was interjecting his opinion and almost trying to influence Bob Bennett's decision. That's an overstep. That's an overreach. The way the situation was handled was incorrect, in my opinion. And it's not the first time Bob Bennett's fucked something like that up. Now, I get that it's Nevada and you're supposed to be all about gaming. They're just supporting that industry. But I've seen these guys, the Nevada State Athletic Commission, reject tons of opponents for tons of different cards for different promoters. They even rejected an opponent for Andre Ward. I believe it was Alexander Brand a couple years back. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's who it was. Because it was too much of a mismatch. And they've turned down 4-rounders for prospects opening up a non-televised portion of a pay-per-view card. They've done that this year. So they turn down fights right and left because they're a mismatch. Yet they just sanctioned a fight for Conor McGregor, who has a record of 0-0, to fight Floyd Mayweather. And not only that, they've sanctioned it to be a 12-round fight, which means it's a quote-unquote championship fight. Unless they've gone back and changed that. But the way I understand it, that's going to be a 12-round fight. Not a 4-rounder, not an 8-rounder, not an exhibition, but a championship boxing match for a guy who's never fought. Even as an amateur, never fought on the international scene. Take from all that what you will, okay? But I don't think this commission should be held up as the gold standard. And I think that their refs are getting old. Their judges are getting old. You look at the scoring of the main event. After 7 rounds, Dave Moretti and Glenn Feldman each gave Andre Ward 4 rounds. Steve Weisfeld had the correct score. He had it 5 rounds to 2 for Kovalev. I can deal with 4 rounds to 3. I could even deal with 4 rounds to 2 with 1 even round. But 4 rounds for Andre Ward? Which 4 rounds are you giving him? I guess you're giving him the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, but what's the other round? Andre Ward, he didn't win 4 rounds. So they were already on their way to doing what they normally do. And I'm not saying it's corruption. And you guys that are talking about people being paid off and this is corruption, stop with that shit. I really don't buy into that. I just don't. There's too many loose lips. There's too many people that talk. If there was just flat out money exchanging hands to call a fight a certain way, I think we'd hear about it, okay? I think it's incompetence. I think it's an old guard, old school way of thinking, of scoring a fight, of seeing a fight. That's outdated. And we need new blood. If the Nevada State Athletic Commission is the most powerful commission on planet Earth in the sport of boxing and in the sport of MMA, it's the most powerful martial arts commission on Earth. We need competent new blood in that commission. We need judges who weren't born before World War II. We need competent, young, new blood in that commission, okay? All this brings me to Tony Weeks, who a lot of you out there are saying that this guy was paid off, that the fix was in. I don't buy into any of that shit. Now, is there some human bias involved? I've heard people say things like, well, Tony Weeks is a black American. Andre Ward's mother was black American. Sergey Kovalev sent out some tweets that were racially insensitive in the opinion of a lot of black folks and a lot of folks of other races as well. Could all of that have played a factor? I don't know. And honestly, how the hell do you know? Are you in Tony Weeks' head? I do find it interesting, and this is a note that Steve Kim actually made. I gotta give him a shout out here. Tony Weeks is the guy who was reffing the Castillo-Corrales fight. For those of you who know how that fight ended, how most people thought Corrales was finished, he spit out his mouthpiece twice, was knocked down twice, was in bad shape, both eyes were closed. 99% of referees would have called that fight off, but Tony Weeks let him fight. You look at the stoppage in the 8th round Saturday night, that doesn't look like the same ref that we saw in Castillo-Corrales. And I could name other fights where Tony let the guys fight. So there did seem to be a difference there in the way that he treated Kovalev in a situation like that. And Kovalev was never down, by the way. Although I do think him being sitting on the 2nd rope should have counted as a knockdown. But the way he treated Kovalev in that situation versus the way he treated Diego Corrales. And again, I could point to other situations. That's just one that Steve Kim brought up today on his podcast that I think was a very, very good point. In the fight, or actually, I'm sorry, before the fight, Tony Weeks pointed at Sergey Kovalev's trunks. And there was a thick silver trim on the belt line, right? Several inches thick, probably 4 inches thick. And he put his hand on it. And he said right here, okay, guys, these punches are good. He went just below it, where the trim ended and the black section of the trunks started. All right, guys, punches here are low. So he made it very, very clear where the low and borderline punches were. When a ref says punches here are good, that's the borderline, okay? He didn't point to the guy's ribs and say punches here are good, because that's no shit. That's the guy's stomach. Those punches are good. He pointed to the borderline and said, these punches are good. He pointed below the borderline and said, these punches are not good. It's not a hard dynamic to understand, guys. But going back to the polarization that exists right now in the world we live in, social media and all that, the low blows, and some of them were borderline, but some of them were low. Depending on what side of that polarized fence you sit on and how far you sit on your side, you're going to interpret those shots differently. My perspective is, if the silver trim is the borderline, anything in the black, let alone the letters on Sergey Kovalev's trunks, which were an inch or two below the borderline, anything that touches any part of that is a low blow by definition of how Tony Weeks set it up before the fight. And I tweeted a video of it today. So go to my Twitter and you'll see where I tweeted the video of Tony Weeks pointing it out. Those of you who love Andre Ward and hate Sergey Kovalev, you're gonna look at it and interpret it a different way probably. You're gonna say, well, if this is the belt line and 1/8 of an inch of Andre Ward's glove touched that, it doesn't matter that the other 8 inches of his glove touched below. That's still borderline. Those of you who hate Andre Ward and love Sergey Kovalev, you're going to be the complete opposite. It could be right on the border. Boom, borderline shot. You're going to say, that's low. He should be disqualified. He should be suspended. Take his whole purse. And I've seen both extremes from both of you. The truth is somewhere in the middle, right? And if you really, really take a look at the shots, guys, starting in the second round, they were low. Some of them were borderline. Numerous shots were low. And I've heard a lot of you say, well, the knockout in the 8th round, quote unquote, was set up by a massive right hand. I hear you. That was an outstanding punch from Andre Ward. It was probably the best punch of his career. That punch was probably the highlight of Andre Ward's boxing career up until this point. However, there were 2 egregious low blows earlier in that round that set up the right hand. There was an egregious low blow in the 7th round that clearly debilitated Sergey Kovalev. Now, I'm not saying these were Andrew Golota type punches where if the belt line's here, Ward was punching down here. But a significant portion of the glove was in the black, and he was even touching the letters on Kovalev's trunks. Guys, those are low blows. They're low blows, okay? Hear me out on this. Athletes in every sport will try to find a way to gain a competitive advantage. It's not just in boxing. And there are some athletes who become very, very good at that. I competed in sports. Any of you have competed in sports, you know what I'm talking about. Maybe you're playing some hoops and there's a rebound and you give a guy a little elbow before you go up and grab the rebound. Maybe you're playing football and you're a lineman and maybe you hold the defender down that's coming in trying to sack your quarterback. Maybe you hold his jersey where the ref can't see, right? That's illegal. But you do it just a little bit and then you put your hands up. I ain't holding them, right? We've all done stuff like that. It happens in boxing as well. And there are certain fighters who become very, very good at towing that line and doing it just enough, but not too much, to where they can get away with it. Now, it's still a foul. It's still wrong. It's still against the rules. But if referee Tony Weeks was going to let some of Andre Ward's stuff go, if he was going to quote unquote let them fight, and it should be noted that Sergey Kovalev threw rabbit punches. Now, he didn't start the dirty stuff. Sergey Kovalev was doing the rabbit punches in retaliation, Ward didn't just go low. He also threw an elbow at one point that looked fairly purposeful. If Ward misses with a shot, he follows with the elbow. It's they call it an old veteran tactic. It's illegal. But you know what? He gets away with it. He's good at it. Oh shit, I missed my right hand. Oh, I'll get you with the elbow. Or I'll pull it back. Sometimes he'll miss, and when he pulls it back, he scrapes you with the elbow. You guys who've ever sparred, you know what that feels like. It don't feel good. It knocks your equilibrium off. All this being said, there's no excuse if you're Sergey Kovalev and this is happening to you and you know the political situation, you know the entire establishment coming into this thing, the people controlling the promotion, 2 of the commentators on the HBO crew, possibly the ref, right? They're not doing you any favors. I'm not going to say they're all against you, but they're not going to do you any favors. You're not going to get any breaks. If somebody's fouling you like that and doing that to you, you have to respond. Sergey responded a few times with some rabbit punches. Okay, that got Ward off him for a little while, but when Ward went low, he found something there and it was getting him results and he kept doing it. And he mixed it in head, body, just enough to where it didn't look egregious to Tony Weeks, and he was letting him fight. That's on Sergey Kovalev to find some way to respond. And some of you out there saying that this is all on Ward, all on Tony Weeks, all on the Nevada State Athletic Commission. You have a legitimate beef. I understand your point of view. But guys, the world ain't fucking fair. And sometimes the deck is stacked against you. And you know that coming into a situation. You know that you're going to have to fight twice as hard as the other guy. And it sucks. But anyone out there who grew up in an underprivileged childhood understands this. It's just the way of the world, right? A lot of you watching this understand where I'm coming from. You know that there are other people out there who have more opportunities than you, privilege, whatever the fuck it is. And you're going to have to work twice as hard as the next guy. And sometimes it pisses you off and wears you down. I get it. But Sergey knew that coming in here. And the bottom line is he let all of that wear him down and he mentally checked out. That's what happened. I'm not saying I love it. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's the way of the world. And I hear you on this one too, because some of you have said, well, if Sergey Kovalev retaliated and went right up to Ward and popped him right in the nuts, Tony Weeks would have immediately taken a point, may have possibly disqualified him on the spot. You know what? You're probably right. But it would have saved face for him because then he can look and say, look at this bias. He was letting this dude hit low, I hit low, and look what he did to me, right? Okay. Back to Tony Weeks. He had made a decision that he was going to let the fighters fight. He wasn't going to call low blows. He was just letting it go. He gave Ward a couple soft warnings and that was it. Fine. Wherever you sit on the fence of that, remember that polarized fence, you may agree or disagree with that. You may like it or not like it. Some of you out there who like it, I think if the situation was reversed, you probably wouldn't like it. Some of you out there that don't like it, I think if the situation was reversed, maybe you'd be more forgiving. So check your bias. Really think about what you're thinking here and check your bias, okay? But the situation was he was letting the low blows go. Fine. Let's strike that from the record. And let's just go to that last segment where Ward had Kovalev on the ropes. He landed 3 straight low blows. Yes, I know, I hear you. He had landed a right hand earlier in the round. Yes, I hear you people on the other side. He set up the right hand with low blows. I hear all of that. Shut up for a second. In that one moment on the ropes, Sergey Kovalev was keeled over, which is usually how you react when you're punched in the nuts. He was keeled over. And to me, it appeared, even the replays I've seen, that he was basically sitting on the rope. He was defenseless, sitting on I'm not going to say defenseless. He was defending himself. He had his hands here. Defenseless is not the right word, but he was sitting on the rope. The rope was holding him up. That is a knockdown. Tony Weeks should have immediately taken Ward to the corner and given Kovalev a 10 count. He didn't do that. Let alone the fact that Kovalev should have been given 5 minutes to recover. So he blew that call. He blew numerous fouls before, but the 3 fouls right there in that moment he blew. And some of you out there are saying the first 2 shots were borderline. I disagree, but I think even the most ardent Kovalev hater would admit that last one was egregiously low. It hit him in the letters on the trunks. Even that last punch right there, 5-minute break. You go to your neutral corner, you go to your neutral corner, you get 5 minutes. That's what should have happened, but it did not happen. Now, had that happened, would it have made any difference in the fight? We don't know. Had Kovalev taken all 5 minutes to get his composure back, would he have come out in that 9th round and been rejuvenated? I highly doubt it. I think Andre Ward was on his way to a stoppage anyway. And that's why I don't understand about the Andre Ward pom-pom wavers and the Sergey Kovalev haters. Guys, If anything, Tony Weeks robbed your man. He robbed Andre Ward of a definitive highlight reel knockout by calling the fight too early. That's just a point that you guys seem to be missing. I don't quite understand. The 8th round was just flat out mishandled by Tony Weeks. And that takes me back to the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Just not a good night. And it ultimately robbed Andre Ward, who worked his ass off in camp for this fight and fought a very masterful fight in certain respects. I don't like the dirty stuff, but in certain respects, he just took Sergey Kovalev's soul, and he was robbed of a definitive highlight reel moment by mishandling of the Nevada Commission, which Tony Weeks is a part of. Douglas Fisher, who I think is one of the best in the sport, he had a mailbag today. He does a mailbag every Monday, every Friday on Ring Magazine's website. And he had a quote that I really, really liked. I just wanted to read this. "It's harsh, but boxing is a harsh sport." I think that says it all. And that's all I'm saying here, guys. Yeah, I'm being harsh to Kovalev. Yeah, I'm being harsh to Ward. And he won. And I'm still being harsh to him. It's a harsh sport. There's harsh realities. That's just what it is. You know, one thing in defense for Tony Weeks, bear with me here, I'm looking at some notes, guys, but one thing about Tony Weeks, he did mishandle a lot of things in this fight, but this was going to be a tough fight to ref for anybody. Can you name another ref out there who would have handled this that much better? I'm sure there's some young refs, but I'm talking about refs, older establishment refs that would have got this job. I don't know, man. This was going to be a tough fight. As far as the fight goes itself, I thought it was interesting that I thought it was clear that Kovalev controlled the fight on the outside and in the mid-range, and Ward controlled the fight on the inside. Ward is one of the better inside fighters in the game. He's dirty with it, but he's good at it. I think Orlando Salido is another one who is probably like a mini version of Andre Ward. Fights very similar on the inside. And I do find it funny that a lot of the same people that are praising Andre Ward for his inside fighting game are the same people that were shitting on the fight between Orlando Salido and Francisco Vargas last year. That was the fight of the year. A lot of you guys said that fight had absolutely no skill, but you love what Andre Ward does on the inside. And it's very, very similar. It just seems to be a double standard. And I can't quite put my finger on why you see those two fighters differently. Similar style, not exactly the same. One thing I wanted to make, another point I wanted to make, and again, I'm just going off my notes here, so bear with me. And I apologize that you guys know my pacing and everything is usually better with these videos, but I'm just trying to get some thoughts out there. Trying to make a metaphor here for the way I see Andre Ward being reffed and officiated in comparison to other sports. Let's look back at the NBA. There were a couple times in the NBA Finals where LeBron James took it to the rack, right? And he got touched. Or maybe he was just shooting a three, and after the ball released, somebody touched his forearm. After the ball went out, foul. Every time, foul, right? There were some times I watched LeBron James on defense where he straight up elbowed a dude, put his knee in someone's back, pushed him, pulled on a jersey. Nothing called. Why? Because it's LeBron fucking James, right? The same foul, that you call for Zaza Pachulia, you're not going to call that foul on LeBron James when he does it. And again, it's harsh, it's not fair, but it's reality. And I think to some degree, that's what we saw Saturday night. So if you're the guy coming into a situation knowing you're the B side, you got to bring these with you and make a difference. Let's look at a recent example where Errol Spence went over to the UK and fought Kell Brook. Errol Spence was not going to be given any favors in that situation from the crowd. And I'm not saying there's anything corrupt or anything like that going on. It's just the reality. The ref, the judges, right? Although I believe they chose neutral judges for that fight. Go figure. The promoter putting on that fight is much more, they're just better at their job than the promoter that was running this fight. But you hear me on the example, right? Errol Spence went over to the UK, brought his fist with him, and he didn't leave it in the hands of the judges or the official or anything. He just beat Kell Brook down. And the fight wasn't dirty or anything like that, but there's plenty of examples we could talk about, guys. One example that somebody brought up on Twitter today is when Kostya Tszyu is fighting Ricky Hatton, and their fight was getting really, really nasty. And I actually thought Ricky Hatton got away with a lot of bullshit in that fight. But there was one part where Tszyu was kind of getting a little dirty, a little rough with him, and Hatton came right out and punched him right in the balls. That little brief moment, that's what Kovalev needed to do. Now, the rest of the fight, ironically, Hatton mirrored Ward's advantages, getting away with certain things. So you got to bring everything you have to the table knowing what you're facing. And Kovalev just didn't do that, guys. So you got to let it go. And another thing Doug Fisher brought up in his mailbag today, these two guys are so polarizing. Their promoters hate each other so much. Their fans are so polarizing. The fringe elements of media, you get the wacko Russian conspiracy theory guys, you get the crazy black supremacist, racist guys, and you get them all together. It's just a nasty combination, and I'm sick of it. I don't want to see these guys fight a third time. I have absolutely zero interest in seeing them fight again, regardless of what comes from Main Event's petition to the commission, which will absolutely, it won't generate anything. You know, Kovalev, some people think Kovalev was trying to sell the low blows at some part and exaggerate them. I think some of the borderline shots, Kovalev was trying to sell them a little bit. Still doesn't change the fact that there were several clear fouls. But I think when the repeated fouls were happening, even borderline shots he was trying to sell to the ref, to Tony Weeks. And I think that was a clear indication that he was in his head. He was thinking about the decision in the first fight. He was thinking about A side versus B side, insider versus outsider. He was in his head. He wasn't here. He wasn't in his body. He wasn't fighting. He was in his head. So at that point, Andre Ward had won the fight. And it really didn't matter if that fight continued and went all 12 rounds. He was going to win anyway, right? Still, Kovalev was a champion, should have been allowed to continue, should have been given that respect. Now, I want to address something about a lot of you saying, I hate Andre Ward. Perhaps I should have opened this video with this. Guys, I don't hate anybody. It takes so much damn energy to hate anybody. I don't like the guy. I think that his holier than thou, I'm a humble Christian guy thing is an act. I think it's a facade. It's an image. Look, all fighters put up images. Floyd Mayweather's Money May guy, that's an image. Sergey Kovalev's Crusher guy, that's an image. People put up different images. A lot of fighters try to play up a bad boy image because that sells, you know, but Ward and his people, I think, try to put on this holier than thou, we're so good, we're so Christian thing, and I just don't buy it. I've heard enough, I've seen enough, I've read enough, I've been told enough. I just don't buy it. So I don't particularly like the person, okay? But as far as him being a fighter, I think he's one of the best out there. And I think by default right now, because of this fight, he's the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. And by the way, I released my pound-for-pound list at the end of last year, and I had Ward and Kovalev behind Chocolatito, but I had them 2A and 2B. I had Ward 2A, I had Kovalev 2B, I believe. And a lot of you out there shit on me. A lot of you who, like me, felt that Kovalev won the first fight. I did too, but I went with what took place. I went with the official decision because you have to accept it. Guys, this is the real world. We can't just go back and say, oh, well, I don't agree with this decision, so I'm just going to change history. Can't do that. So a lot of you out there accusing me of hating Andre Ward, I understand why some of you may think that. I'm extremely critical of the guy. I go off on Twitter a lot. I get it. But I don't hate anybody. During this whole promotion, Ward has been calling Sergey Kovalev a bully. When in actuality, the bully this whole time was Team Ward and Roc Nation. And it wasn't just during the promotion. It wasn't just in the ring during the fight. It was after the fight. Again, go watch the post-fight press conference. Tell me that ain't bullying going on. It was bullying. And I'm not being an SJW or whatever some of you have fucking accused me of. I'm just being real here. One side asking for neutral judges and you saying, no, go fuck yourself, we're in charge, that's bullying. Now, some of you who are biased will look at that and say, nah, man, that's just playing the angles. Okay, well, when that happens against your man, see if you feel the same way. The bully this entire time was one side. It wasn't the Kovalev side. Kovalev mishandled some things on Twitter and is himself a polarizing person, not the best personality, at least in terms of the way the media perceives him. I get all that, but he wasn't a bully here, guys. It was Ward, while putting on this holier-than-thou facade. That's just kind of why I don't like the guy. And then dealing with all the stuff where they bring their friends and credential them and the hooping and hollering, jumping up and down, dealing with all that, it's unlikable. It's not hard to criticize Andre Ward. It's not hard to praise him for being a very good fighter, but it's not hard to criticize the guy. I don't hate anybody. Bending the rules, some of the things that were going on, and then after you even won the event, continuing the bullying, there's just no need for it. There's absolutely no need for it. All right, let's see. If I covered everything, I know a lot of you are still going to fucking hate on this entire thing. Oh, performance-enhancing drugs. Okay, let me touch on this. You guys know I have a good relationship with VADA. I can ask them a question anytime. They'll answer me. They're very transparent. They're really good with media, okay? Some of you out there, and some of that fringe wacko element, are just flat out accusing Andre Ward of using steroids. Just because he looked bigger, sturdier, and was more powerful in this fight. You have reason to be suspicious in this age of sport. Anytime you see something different from a fighter or any athlete, from one sporting event to the next, when you see a big change, people have questions. The fact that drug testing was delayed for this fight, people have questions, right? The fact that we can't watch what somebody's doing in between periods of drug testing, people have questions. That's all legitimate, guys. But to flat out say, this person's using steroids and this is why I think that, you can't do that. It doesn't work that way. You have to have some physical evidence. You have to have a smoking gun. You have to have something on somebody before you throw out an accusation like that. You could say XYZ looks suspicious, and I do that all the time. I get shit for it. But you guys, I've talked about this. I'm very careful, and I think a lot of you need to be more careful about the way you word this stuff. You can suspect somebody all day, but without evidence, you can't say for sure they're doing anything. So as far as everything we know, Andre Ward has never failed a drug test. VADA tested him. Yes, it was delayed. Yes, we don't know what the hell he did before. We don't know. But him and Kovalev were tested during camp for this fight, the majority of camp, and they both passed their test. So performance-enhancing drug stuff, great to ask questions, great to raise suspicions when they're justified, but stop at the accusations. That's dangerous, and it's a slippery slope. So some of these channels out there are just throwing that shit out like it's nothing. Chill with that. It's not good. It's not helping. There's too much misinformation out there about this stuff. All right. Looking at my notes, losing my voice partially from talking so damn much. I talked about the bad style mesh. I talked about the fact that I don't want to see either of these guys again. I talked about in my first video what I think their options are. Sergey Kovalev has absolutely zero leverage right now. I don't know what he does other than try to work himself into a mandatory position. Andre Ward talked about going to cruiserweight, heavyweight, fighting Anthony Joshua. That's just clickbait bullshit. But you know, he probably could go to cruiserweight. And he probably, if he really, truly did go to cruiserweight and maybe got a Tony Bellew to come down, and he actually fought Tony Bellew in the UK, and then maybe beat an Alexander Usyk here in LA or Oakland or something, that changes the conversation about Andre Ward. You're not just talking about a Hall of Fame fighter at that point. You're talking about an all-time great fighter. That would elevate the Andre Ward discussion. At this point, he doesn't rate all-time great anything. But he's a Hall of Famer if he retires right now, just based on accomplishment. So if he were to do that, and look, Tony Bellew, that's just a money-making brand kind of fight. But if he were to actually win titles and beat guys like Alexander Usyk, and I'm not saying he would, I'm just putting it out there, that's all-time great kind of stuff, man. If you're winning titles between 168 and 200, that's some serious shit. So if he was serious about that, I'd love to see it. At this point, it's all clickbait and talk. Oh, quick note about HBO's people. And I know I mentioned this a little bit, but Max Kellerman. During the fight, look, Roy Jones is a former fighter. He's going to be biased towards fighters he likes, guys he's hung out with, styles he likes. I kind of expect Roy to get a little tribal and biased when it comes to fighters he likes and his commentating. I'm not forgiving it. I'm just saying I understand it. But Max Kellerman, you're supposed to be the color commentator, the boxing historian, the guy who interjects with your vast knowledge of all the boxing history and stuff. You're supposed to be the heir apparent to Larry Merchant. You're not supposed to go up in the ring, get down on your knees, drop Andre Ward's trunks, and fucking blow him with a microphone in your hand. That's not supposed to happen. And I normally like Max Kellerman. I think he gets too much shit from a lot of so-called Twitter experts who think that he doesn't do a good job. I actually think he does a good job, and he loves the sport and promotes it well. I just think in this case, dude, you're not supposed to be a fan. And I understand. We're all human. I know every single member of the press I've ever talked to, even guys who have been doing it for 50 years, former guys now who are retired. And you talk to them, and they tell you there's certain fighters they fall in love with, whether it's their style, their personality, how their fights are exciting, whatever. And there's certain guys they really don't like. But when you go into a post-fight interview, or when you write an article, or you do an interview for YouTube, or whatever it is, you shouldn't be filleting a motherfucker. You're not supposed to do that. And Max Kellerman, HBO, that's like top of the line, gold standard in boxing, right? You're supposed to set an example for all the underlings to follow. That post-fight interview and some of that commentary was just a little too much. Not Max Kellerman's best night. And by the way, had Sergey Kovalev won by knockout and Max Kellerman done the same thing to Sergey Kovalev, I'd be saying the same shit. You're not supposed to talk that way. I've never heard a commentator, after a live sporting event, at least in boxing, fillet a fighter like that. I've never seen it. If you guys can think of a better example, comment below and let me know. But nothing jumps to mind of a case where it was just that almost... What was that gay movie with the two cowboys? Brokeback Mountain. It was almost Brokeback Mountain. There was just this bromance, this love affair. Dude, you got to pull back on some of that, Max. You got to pull back. Oh, and all of you posting Tony Weeks comments on Twitter, that's a troll account. And that guy's gotten people several... He got me the first time he did that shit last year. That's a troll account. Doesn't count. Now, yeah, Al Bernstein and others replied to it. They got had... Always check. When you guys see tweets and stuff, before you try to post that stuff in a video comment, whatever, check who tweeted it, go to the actual Twitter account and see, look at the line of tweets and just use some logic. It's obvious that was a troll account. All right, so I covered everything here. I know, look, I rambled on and on for almost an hour. I just wanted to leave no stone unturned here. Let me know what you guys think. Comment, logically comment below, and let's continue this conversation. I will cover the entire card. I will review the entire card in this week's episode of the Neutral Corner, which will be posted tomorrow night. So look for that. As always, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/Montero Unboxing. Those of you who follow me, and whether you agree with me or you disagree with me, and we have legitimate arguments and discussions, but you're cool about it, you're respectful and reasonable and logical about it, I thank you. I welcome debate on this channel. I just am not going to do with one-sided, biased, ridiculous bullshit. Not going to deal with that. So that's it. That's my rant for tonight.